Days after withdrawing the Ukraine grain deal, Russia says all ships bound for Ukraine in the Black Sea are now potential military targets, and that has sent wheat prices soaring. But it's unclear what specific action Moscow will take if a ship passes through. The US, though, has warned that civilian ships may be targeted. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has now laid down conditions for returning to the agreement.
The first demand for re-entry to the grain deal is the withdrawal of sanctions on supplies of Russian grain and fertilizers. Second, all obstacles for Russian banks and financial institutions servicing food and fertilizer supplies must be removed. We are talking about their immediate connection to the SWIFT international banking settlement system. We do not need any promises. We need these conditions to be met.
The UN and Turkish mediated deal brought relief to countries around the world, especially developing countries. The United Nations, the EU and the US have all warned about the impact on global food security after Russia's withdrawal.
Russia continues to use food as a weapon of war. This is the second day in a row we've seen the Russian Federation make threats against ships in international water. A second day in a row after launching attacks on Odessa, which is the major port for shipping Ukrainian grain. So I think it ought to be quite clear to everyone in the world right now that Russia is using food as a weapon of war, not just against the Ukrainian people, but against all the people in the world, especially the most underdeveloped countries who depend on grain from the region.
Meanwhile, Russia has continued its attacks on the Ukrainian port city of Odessa for a second night. Kyiv says that a grain and oil terminal were hit, but Russia says it successfully hit military facilities and ammunition depots. From Moscow, here's Yulia Shapovalova with the reaction from the Russian military.
We can see how Russia's termination of the grain deal has resulted in some serious consequences, as the Defense Ministry has issued a statement addressing all international ships heading towards the Ukrainian ports. At midnight, July the 20th, all ships sailing in the Black Sea and approaching the Ukrainian ports will be considered carriers of military cargo involved in the Ukrainian conflict on the Kyiv side. The Russian military named several maritime areas in the northwestern and southeastern parts of the international waters of the Black Sea, which have been declared temporarily dangerous for navigation. With pulling out of the grain deal, Russia meant it wouldn't allow Ukraine to export grain from its ports and provide its ships with safe passage through the Black Sea to Turkey. Plus, earlier, the Kremlin announced that the grain deal had been a cover for Ukraine to deliver weapons into the country, while Ukraine called on Turkey and the UN to continue transportations of its grain. So the Russian side now predicts that it's hardly possible that Ukrainian merchant ships will be escorted by warships of other countries, so the Defense Ministry's decision may kill a significant part of Ukraine's foreign trade. Reporting from Moscow, Yulia Shapovalova, Al Jazeera.
Let's take a closer look at the grain deal signed in June of last year. Ukraine and Russia had agreed that ships would be able to depart from 3 key Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea, including Odessa. Turkish, Ukrainian and UN staff monitored the loading of grain to ensure that ships weren't carrying any weapons. The UN says the deal allowed it to transport more than 725,000 tons of wheat to help people in need in countries hit by war and extreme weather events. Patrick Butry is a defence and security analyst at the University of Bath. He believes Russia's suspicion that cargo ships are being used to supply weapons is unfounded.
I think, on the face of it, a threat like that is escalatory, but it's aimed at asserting maximum leverage. And it has had an impact, and a major impact, but it's not something that's come completely out of the blue. In terms of the security risk, essentially, I don't see, and again, I'm not a naval insurance expert here, but once there's a threat to shipping, someone needs to guarantee either the indemnity or the safety of the vessel. Ukraine will try to do that. I think they've already set up a fund, and it's been existing for a while to try to entice shipping companies in anyway. But I would say with the threat that Russia has now made, the most likely outcome here is, at least in the short term, it will kill the deal, which was already being strangled anyway. The interesting thing, the way that has been working, is essentially boats are coming out of 3 different Ukrainian ports, and they're helped by Ukrainian pilots to navigate the minefields in the sea, basically laid by both the Russians and the Ukrainians. Then they get out to a muster point and then sail towards the Bosphorus. And this is all coordinated with the UN and Turkey and Russia and Ukraine as observers. And they can check the boats as they go through. So the accusation that Ukraine will be bringing in military hardware on this is dubious, I would say, because the Russians have had the chance to inspect them if they wanted to. So that seems to be smoke and mirrors as usual.